Hi, everybody. Obviously, I'm not here today. I think I warned you in yesterday's class I was going to be out. We're going to be picking off from where we left off yesterday. Yesterday, I'm hoping, because obviously this video was done before today's Thursday's class, um, hoping that we're going to finish Italy in terms of guided notes. Today, we'll focus on Germany. With any time that we have left over today, this shouldn't take the whole period to go through this lecture. You can use the rest of the period to work on your World War II project, to build your websites. So use that time wisely to have at least started and have it built. So anyway, I guess to start, we'll have a little joke. I love jokes. You guys know my jokes are hilarious. What does a biologist wear on the first date? Designer jeans. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah. All right. Anyway, that's my joke for the day. All right. Anyways, it's corny. I know. Whatever. All right. So anyway, we should have gotten through this yesterday with Mussolini's first act. So we're gonna start with we're gonna focus a lot of it on Germany. We're gonna go on Germany today. So again, fill in what you need with your guided notes. I will check this on Monday, by the way. Make sure it's done. It should be done. You have the whole class period to do this. All right. So again, we've already mentioned this a few times. I'm kind of fly through this. You can pause the video if you need to catch up and go back and start the video. And so go at your own pace. But again, Germany after World War One, Germany is humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles. The provisions, as we talked about, with Brat, blame, reparations, army territory. Georges Clemenceau of France really wanted to severely punish Germany, which he did with these provisions. With the war guilt clause, Germany was humiliated after this. They'd admit full responsibility for starting the war. That's always not really a good feeling of, with the whole world pointing the finger at you. When there were other things going on just besides, them. There were many countries to really blame. The reparations, number two. When you're talking about billions of dollars back then, $80 billion. In today's money, that's $1 trillion. That is going to absolutely cripple your economy. It's not including what you already spent during the war. So again, I think I told you guys this verbally. They finished paying off their war debt in 2010. So almost 100 years of paying off war debt. So things were already rough in Germany. Then you add this into it. It is going to be a very, very tough go, where poverty is going to be extremely high. Plus, they lose some of their lands that were used for natural resources. So it's going to be hard for them to industrialize and keep that going. Third thing, there were limitations on the German army. They weren't allowed to have an air force. They'd reduced their navy and their army as well. So that's going to hinder their ability to defend themselves and to grow. And again, military jobs also is a job. So that's less jobs for people to have. And then four, as I mentioned, loss of territory, loss of colonies, loss of territories in Europe. They lost parts of Poland. So that will really hinder, what they're able to do. All right, so pause it if you need any of this, and start off with next slide. All right, so as we discussed, the rise of the Nazi Party and Hitler. Again, they stressed nationalism. Again, the whole world was pointing the finger at them at the end of World War One. People felt down on themselves. Hitler wanted to bring them back up and have them remember, the revolution of 1870, where Otto von Bismarck and then Kaiser Wilhelm led Germany to independence. They wanted to remember those things, like their history and their pride, and how they once were controlled by an empire, and they, to want their independence. So this is going to be an extremely nationalistic group, the Nazi Party. Again, as you read about, the Germans they believe were the master race of Europe, and they descended from the Aryan race, which is the blonde hair, blue eyes, like the Nordic peoples in Northern Europe. So they believe that they were destined to be in charge, and all the rest of the populations, the inferior races, the Slavs, the Jews, the Gypsies, the Sikh, were supposed to cater to the Aryans, work for the Aryans. So again, as I said, Jews and Slavs were considered inferior races, which weakened Germany and blamed them for Germany's problems. So Hitler and the Nazi Party is going to blame them. I mean, when you end World War One and you're dealing with poverty and all these issues, Germany, Hitler and the Nazi Party found an enemy, which was the Jews and the Slavs, is to blame for kind of where they're at. They blamed them for the defeat in the war. They blamed them for high unemployment. And obviously they were blaming them for the spread of communism as well. So before and after World War I, Germany was seriously divided by region, religion, class, and politics. As in Italy and Russia, a strong democratic tradition never existed in Germany. So before World War I, Germany was a democratic nation, although they never really had that history of being democratic. And after World War I, you had the Weimar Republic was a democratic body after the war. And when you don't have a democratic tradition and you're used to like autocratic and monarchies and one person with all the rule, it's hard. It's hard to have a democratic society. People argue, factions form. It's hard to see eye to eye on things. So the same thing goes for Italy and Russia. They tried having those things as well, having democracies, and it wasn't easy. People were used to and wanting one person to have all the power and rule, which will definitely help the Nazis and help Hitler rise to power. All of these problems led many Germans to conclude that democracy was ill-suited for their nation. They preferred a one leader, one power type of system. So a quote from Hitler: "Make the lie big, make it simple, keep saying it, and eventually they will believe it." Really kind of insulting the intelligence of the public. That sometimes people, they follow the news what they want to follow. You can even say that in today's terms, in today's age with the media, and there's different sources out there and fake news, whatever you want to call it, that's very easy accessible. People don't want to do the research on their own. They'll take somebody else's word for it, and sometimes in those statements or in those media sources, sometimes there are some little, say, stretching of the truth. And if you don't do the research to support or to find out for yourself what the truth is, if you keep repeating it over and over and over again, eventually these people are going to believe it. So basically brainwashing the people is something that these dictators are going to do. Stalin did it. Mussolini did it. Hitler did it. You got to make people believe in what you're saying. So who is fascism? Nazism. Who's that going to apply to? In Germany. So notice it's going to be different in some of these places. Whereas in Italy, it's mostly the middle and upper classes. They are fearful of communism. In Germany, it's going to appeal to give an enemy to hate. So anybody that wanted to place blame on somebody after the war with where they're at with poverty, that's going to appeal to them. Hitler was a very talented public speaker, very talented. So he had a way of convincing people things. So that was one thing. Two, the less wealthy people and the middle class. So the shopkeepers, the small farmers, office workers, teachers, artisans. So really, this message that Hitler's going to convey is going to be really, really popular amongst that class. Again, anti-communism. Hitler did not like communism. He believed Hitler would protect them from the large industrialists and communists. So being fearful of the rich, being fearful of the communists, kind of appealing to those middle grounds, like the middle class. So pretty popular. And think about where most people are located at. Most people are kind of in that middle class area and lower class, not in the upper classes. So Hitler did, in terms of that, having a base of people really appealing to where most people were on the economic spectrum. You see the picture here of, you can obviously see the crowds, and think about what dictators do. You see all the banners, the signs, the pictures. That's spread all throughout all these dictatorships. As you can see, that's a big part of the propaganda campaign. All right, so the rise of Hitler. Hitler became the leader of the Nazi Party in the 1920s. He promised to make Germany powerful again. So here are some promises that were made by Hitler in the 20s. At this point in the 20s, though, Nazism, it was gaining popularity, but it wasn't quite there yet. But he still started, getting a following. So the economy, he condemned the Treaty of Versailles, and he promised to ignore it, which he will. We'll talk about that in a little bit. 2, nationalism. He promised to increase the military, instill cultural institutions, control education, meaning control education means that you're telling teachers and telling schools what they should be teaching, for nationalism. Anti-Semitism. Nazis were going to intensify the tradition of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a hatred or prejudice towards Jews. So this has been around for a long time, but the Nazi Party is really going to hone in on that. They're really going to focus on the anti-Semitic feelings at this time, and he wanted to stamp out communism. And he said that only the Nazis can stop communists, protect communists. So those are the four promises he's going to make. In 1933, Hitler was appointed chancellor by Paul von Hindenburg. Paul Hindenburg was the president of Germany, of the Democratic Society of the Republic. As Nazism got more popular, as Hitler got more popular, he basically had no choice but to appoint him as chancellor. Nazi membership was over 1 million people. So that's kind of what he's kind of forced to do that in terms of the popularity. It became a big political party. So in February 1933, the Reichstag is a building caught on fire. The president was afraid of a socialist revolution, again, blaming communists, very similar to what's happening in Russia with chaos and anarchy. So Paul von Hindenburg gave Hitler the power of emergency powers, meaning that Article 48 of the Weimar Constitution permitted civil liberties to be suspended. So basically your rights were done. And Hitler did that. He suspended your rights in what they call the time of national emergency. And guess who's going to blame for the fire? Jews. A few months later, in July, he began the totalitarian state called Third Reich. Third Reich is basically his belief that the Nazis and the Aryans would be in power for the next 1,000 years, a 1,000-year empire. He forbade all political parties except the Nazis were forbidden. Any of your political enemies. He created the Gestapo, which was a secret police to monitor people, to find traitors within the country, communists, people that were talking ill will against the Nazi party. And this group gained access to the government and the army. So apologies, it's kind of hard to see, but again, about a year later, he had something called the Blood Purge. Blood Purge was was the murder of all of Hitler's rivals and enemies in August of 1934. As I just mentioned, get rid of your political enemies. They don't get a following. Make sure that you're the only party in town. This is what this says here. It's kind of hard to see. The president died, and so Paul von Hindenburg passed away, and Hitler declared himself president and chancellor of the Third Reich. They called him the Führer. So now he has all the power. He's not sharing it no longer with Paul von Hindenburg anymore once he passes away. In 35 and 37, this is where he starts to really start to violate the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. So you see 35, Hitler began to build up Germany's military, which he wasn't supposed to do. 37, he announces a plan for attaining Lebensraum, vocabulary term, and you know that, highlight it. That means living space. So he wants to make sure the Germans have the living space throughout Europe to have their empire. So what does that mean? It means if you are a German living in Poland, if you're a German living in Czechoslovakia, if you're a German living in Belgium, whatever, that he's going to free you, and they'll basically gain you access into their empire, conquer those lands where Germans live that they lost during World War I. Believe it or not, 1938, Hitler was named Time Magazine Man of the Year. There were a lot of changes going on in Germany. The economy was doing better from what it was. So he did live up to some of his promises about building up German nationalism, creating a better economy, building up his military. He was immensely popular amongst his base of lower to middle class people. And even in 1936, the Nazis and the Germans are going to host the 1936 Olympics, where he's going to put Germany on the map and showcasing to the world that how they've been rebuilt since World War I, and how they overcame a lot of those problems. And even a lot of people, some people even felt sorry for the Germans after the World War I. So they kind of had a soft spot. We'll see here. Here's a good story about how this country rose, overcame things, and now they're back on the map as becoming a world power. However, Hitler he took down all the signs of anti-Semitic stuff. He hid a lot from the world about kind of what was truly going on there. But anyway, all right. So anyway, that's your notes. The rest of the period is for you to work on your websites. All right. Adios. Have a good weekend.